loud.
Hey.
Hey.
I was like,
Are you on the West Coast?
yes.
Beautiful light.
Yeah, it is beautiful here. It's the best place.
It is the best place. I'm just south of you.
Where are you?
In Olympia, Washington.
Oh, I've never been.
No?
No. Is it nice?
I don't know why. It's pretty nice. It's really pretty where I am.
Yeah.
Well, you're very prolific online. I should introduce you. You're Meghan Murphy, and you are the founder of Feminist Current, not Current, but Current.
That's right. Current.
And you granted me this interview, and I just want to preface this. I don't know how the comments below this video are going to act.
I'll be nice. They're going to be like, she's so pretty.
Well, we have that. We have that, at least as a baseline. So you have a clean apartment. You're pretty. Yeah.
Really smart.
And I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to start to branch out and talk to people who are different than me and ideologically different than me. And I went through and I was reading some of your stuff and watching some of your talks or lectures. I don't know what you're comfortable calling.
Well, which ones? I guess it depends. Probably okay. More. I don't know. I think I would do more talks than lectures, I would say.
Yeah. Kind of like a cross between an academic spoken word kind of vibe.
Like rapping. I do a lot of rapping. Yeah, so that.
and you run a blog that's pretty it's a pretty busy blog. When did you found that? In 2012?
I founded it in 2012.
Okay.
And yeah, it does really well. I mean, it's really, I mean, as far as feminist websites go, it's pretty big time.
And I don't know much about feminism. I wrestle with op-ed activism. That's kind of what I call like the stuff that appears in The Guardian and New York Times. I think you watched one of my videos about just riffing on one of these kind of op-ed pieces, these personal stories and stuff. So I kind of wanted to like use this, if you're comfortable, if you want to, just use this as a chance for me to learn about what your conception of feminism is currently and what you're trying to do within that field and where you're trying to push it.
Sure. Totally. Sounds good.
Thank you for like swatting my professionalism away so we can just have a conversation.
I'm not very professional, I'm afraid.
So what is you studied gender theory or women's studies, and you got a master's in that?
Yep. I noticed that you had done some videos on women's studies. I think I didn't really watch them all the way through. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, I did my BA in women's studies, and then I did a master's degree in gender, sexuality, and women's studies at Simon Fraser University. Yeah, I think I finished that around 2012 also. It took me maybe 9 years to finish my BA.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm really old also.
You're in good company then. You're really old, but you look young, just like me.
Thank you. I did get ID'd at the liquor store today. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I get ID'd at the liquor store all the time, so I don't know if they're just really stickler. I think that I also dress like a teenager often, so.
It's that party animal side.
Young at heart.
Yeah,
they can tell. They can tell how much I drink. She must be young if she drinks that much.
Or they just don't trust you with the drink. By the way, I'm drinking a trail beer right now. Just want to throw that out there.
Nice, cool, like an outdoorsy beer.
I guess so. It just kind of rolled down the trail. Yeah.
Great.
The deers kind of just dropped it on my porch. So.
Oh, nice. So yeah, women's studies. I think it was sort of different back then. Not too much different, but a bit different. I feel like queer theory and gender studies and all this trans stuff hadn't really totally taken over in academia yet. So I actually had a really good experience. I really enjoyed my BA and my master's degree, and I sort of feel like I got out just in time before things went totally crazy.
Mm-hmm. And have you been? I saw one talk where you kind of broached that issue about how the new current, I think you named it third wave feminism, and you brought up intersectionality, how that's kind of started to shape or change maybe a fundamental aspect of what feminism is. And is that something that you find that you're wrestling with or trying to parse out?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of always been what I've done, has been to criticize third wave feminism. Like, since I started writing about feminism, I've always done that, because it's just that, I mean, I don't even think it is feminism. And I think that, ironically, that third wave feminism, or whatever, third wave ideology is like what most people think of when they think about feminism, and particularly people who like mock feminism and mock women's studies. Like, I don't know, you probably maybe know some people like that, but so, like, I find that, like, you know, like MRAs online or whatever, and just in general, people who think that they're opposed to feminism are thinking about third wave feminism. And third wave feminism is really easy to mock because it's so stupid and ridiculous. And, like, I mean, it's this super individualistic, narcissistic, very immature approach to politics.
Okay.
That's really focused around, like, personal empowerment, and, like, if I choose it and I like it, then nobody's allowed to say anything, and anything that is my experience is valid, and no one's allowed to challenge my experience.
Okay. And as opposed to, is second wave the correct term, or what are we opposing that to? What are we opposing third wave feminism to? And what's the core value of that?
Real feminism?
Real feminism. Is there a trademark on that? I just pictured a trademark. Like real milk or
actual
like
feminism. Yeah.
And what's the core value of real feminism?
Well, okay, so I mean, you could call it radical feminism. Like, I always say, I sort of refuse to call myself a radical feminist. I just call myself a feminist because I'm so stubborn. But, you know, like, I also say that the root of my analysis is based in radical feminist theory. So, yeah, so I would say I would not necessarily pin it to a wave per se, but like, in general, radical feminism is about dismantling the system we call patriarchy, and radical feminism has been primarily focused on things like ending male violence against women, on issues like prostitution, issues like pornography, stuff around sex and sexuality, like looking at heterosexuality in a critical way, looking at systems of power, right, as opposed to looking at ways that we can feel personally empowered, or ways that we can sort of reframe things in order to make ourselves feel better about it.
Okay. And by dismantling heterosexuality, do you mean the standard dynamics between men and women, or the core dynamics between men and women?
I would say, I mean, I don't want to dismantle heterosexuality. I think heterosexuality is a real thing that exists. I'm heterosexual. I can't make myself be a lesbian. I mean, maybe that would be easier. I'm actually positive that would be easier. If only. But I can't do it. So, I think it's a real thing. I think more it's about looking at compulsory heterosexuality and looking at the ways that we're sort of socialized into heterosexuality, and the way that, like, things play out between men and women in heterosexual relationships, and those kinds of dynamics, and heterosexual sex, and the way that, I mean, sort of specifically a critique that a radical feminist would make, and a critique that I have made, is that, heterosexual sex is often very male-centered, and it's not focused on female pleasure so much as it is focused on male pleasure, and, an end result which satisfies a man, but not necessarily a woman. So things like that.
And so in challenging that, or in trying to maybe it's not about decentering men so much as recentering the betweenness, or that shared capacity of pleasure of both parties in the relationship, or maybe centering woman in that. But how do you envision swinging that, or pushing that towards a more centered,
I think
together centered?
Yeah, I think that it's just like the way that even like the way we understand sex and the way that we talk about sex in our culture, like the way that we understand like what it means to say that a woman has lost her virginity, like that's totally rooted in like a heterosexual idea of sex. It's rooted in penetrative sex, and of course there's like different kinds of sex, and lesbians have sex also, and it's also this sort of normalization of the idea that women can or should feel uncomfortable or be in pain during sex. Like I actually read an article really recently that was talking about how many women experience pain during heterosexual penetrative sex, and that women kind of just go along with it because they're so accustomed to the idea that sex might be just uncomfortable or even painful for them. Like we assume and we know that when girls first have sex, it's probably going to hurt. You know, like men don't think about sex in that way. Men don't think about sex in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to do this and go along with it, even though this hurts or is uncomfortable or is unsatisfying. Like men know how to satisfy themselves in sex, and that's what we think sex is, a thing. You know, I'm not saying that sex isn't satisfying for women or can't be satisfying for women. I mean, I know that it is, and I know that it can be, but you know, there's also, I also know lots of women who've had painful sex or uncomfortable sex or boring sex, and you just kind of suffer through it, and because you know that it's important to him, and you think that his pleasure is more important than your pleasure.
So is it about recognizing that imbalance of pleasure, for example, and then trying to educate? You said that men know how to satisfy themselves in sex. Does that mean that women don't, or there's a difficulty for women to communicate their satisfaction to the man?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different things. Again, I think women are sort of socialized to kind of be polite and to go along with it and not really say something. And I think that it's awkward to talk about sex also. Like that's like a reality that it's like, especially if it's somebody new, like maybe further along in your relationship. And I suspect, I'm pretty sure that for a lot of women, the sex and like their pleasure gets better the more you get to know somebody and the more you feel comfortable with them. Like, I don't think that one night stands are particularly satisfying for women sexually. For most women, I should say, not all women. I'm not saying that one night stands are bad or can't be fun, but I think that for a lot of women, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience as well as like from having talked to lots and lots of women and like having read studies about this and stuff, is that like, you know, once you get further down the line in a relationship with a man, I think that the sex does become more enjoyable because you're able to communicate about it and you feel more comfortable and you stop feeling like you're supposed to perform. Like that's a thing that so many women, especially young women, do, and they learn to do that as they think of sex as a performance. They're so aware of being looked at, right? And they've grown up in this culture that has so much porn everywhere, and where women are objectified and where women are treated as things to be looked at and things that are supposed to be sexy and beautiful and tittillating. And so they see themselves through that lens. Like that's sort of what, when we talk about like internalizing the male gaze, you know, when women are picturing a man looking at them. So when you're having sex, you sort of feel like you're performing and you're aware of what your body looks like or what your face looks like. And that's not like a good recipe for pleasure. Like you're not going to have an orgasm if you're so busy thinking like, oh, does my face look weird? Like, you know what I mean? So that's another aspect to like the imbalance in terms of like pleasure.
And so over time that in general speaking, I don't know who exactly we're speaking of, but over time, you're saying there tends to be more comfort that a woman experiences in like letting go of her performance in a relationship
Yeah,
to a man. And
I think for sure, like as you get to know somebody and as you feel more comfortable with them and you feel like you can maybe talk to them about the things that
hmm,
you enjoy or whatever, and that you can just relax and not feel like you're being looked at and judged and that you have to perform this like corny fantasy. I mean, I'm
hmm.
sure that doesn't happen to all women, but I think that is sort of common. And I mean, yeah, I mean it's complicated because I'm sure I mean, I also know that there's women who try to please their partners or their husbands by participating in activities that, you know, aren't really pleasurable to them or that might be degrading or whatever because they think, you know, this is what turns a man on and this is what I have to do to keep a man. And that makes me feel sad too. It's like you shouldn't do something that you don't want to do in sex or that hurts or makes you feel bad or uncomfortable or whatever. But yeah, I think that women really learn that they have to do that. And, you know, thanks to the third wave feminism, in large part, they learn that in order to be like a sexually liberated, empowered woman, they have to be into pornography and they have to be into BDSM and they have to like
Hmm.
let their boyfriends like choke them or you know, like, you know, participate in all these like pornographic fantasies and that if they don't want to have anal sex, then they're uptight, you know, like they've been fed all
Hmm.
these messages by these like pro porn feminists
So,
who say like, you know, you're prude and you're uptight if you're just having like, I don't know, vanilla sex. I guess that's what they call it.
yeah, it seems to truncate what you're saying. It seems that you're advocating for respect,
Yes. I
and respect,
think
and
respect.
yeah, and in respect is a mutual appreciation and recognition of the other person's needs, or
Respect.
desires, pleasures.
Sure, yeah, respect, communication, consideration. Like I think that a lot of men, again, especially young men, don't. I think that they might not understand that what's pleasurable for them isn't necessarily pleasurable for a woman. And I think some of them don't care. Like, I think a lot of men actually are kind of self centered when it comes for sex. Like, they want to do what they want to do and they want to get off and they don't really
Hmm.
care so much about her pleasure. And then for men who may care about her pleasure, they might just have like zero information about what a woman would enjoy and don't really understand how to go about
Hmm.
trying to ensure she does enjoy herself.
So how do we foster that sort of communication in society?
Well,
How do we foster men young men specifically to slow down and to restrain themselves and to become more allowing of information and feedback instead of just thrusting their way through life?
um, yeah, like I mean, I do think that porn is a big part of the problem because I think that porn teaches men that women enjoy things that they don't enjoy.
Hmm.
We don't enjoy gangbangs.
I don't either. Just to put that out there.
Most of us don't enjoy anal sex. Most of us don't enjoy being called misogynist names in bed.
Hmm.
Um, you know, like, so I think that men grow up watching pornography and think that this kind of like really aggressive, sometimes violent,
And
often
disrespectful and demeaning.
really disrespectful, like
Yeah.
really like degrading. I think they grow up learning that that's what sex is. So that's a problem. And yeah, other than that, I mean, it would be great if men just understood that it's like what feels good to you doesn't necessarily feel good to a woman and try to communicate and try to ask. And I mean, I'm not at all against casual sex or one night stands, but as far as female pleasure goes, and you know, when I was younger, I would have said like, no, one night stands are great. Like casual sex is great. Like it's a fun. Shut up. Don't be such a prude.
Hmm.
And you know, but the reality is that for women, like I think that one night stands and casual sex are really not that satisfying. And I think that if a man really cares about a woman and cares about ensuring that she's enjoying herself, then he would sort of try to engage in a respectful relationship with her and try to get to know her, try to work on communication. And women do have some responsibility also to communicate too. I mean, like I said, it's hard and it's awkward and you're like, I don't want to talk about this. I'm just going to go along with it. And like, I don't want to like start ordering you around or something like that. But,
yeah. So
yeah.
I want to tease out, are you advocating, I don't mean to be confrontational at all by this, but are you advocating for more conservative structures of gender relationships, like a kind of a chivalrous kind of restraint of the man?
No.
And a pattern of behavior.
Men are any better at sex than like liberal men are. I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
I don't mean politically. I just mean a more Victorian or like a higher expectation for how a man acts, like a more detailed, organized set of behaviors, like you would find in a no.
No, because I don't think like having like some old-fashioned rule book about, being a gentleman, because I feel like that ends up playing into weird gender roles that aren't conducive towards good relationships between men and women either. Like then that's saying that like a woman should be treated with kid gloves and a man should behave in like a chivalrous way. I think that both people can be respectful. I think that I mean, I don't really like the word equality because I don't think that it really describes what I'm looking towards here. But I think like sort of treating women with respect and understanding that like this isn't all about you. It's just, so much of it is just about not being selfish and not acting like a misogynist, like, and not being violent. Like, why do you need to try to choke your partner in bed? Why is that necessary?
Again, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't.
Why do you need to?
I don't do that. But
I want to talk about this now.
Okay, let's confront my choking thing.
I think this is a good time to talk about you.
Well, as long as you don't accuse me of gangbangs, I think I'll just accept the choking problem. That's interesting. The thing about gender roles is that they are, the thing about stereotypes is that they are a way of packaging information for a wide audience. They eventually break down once somebody grows out of them, but they're very good, especially for young people, to have these roles or these structures, these archetypes, these images of what I should be. And so a properly concocted gender stereotype would set you on the path towards something that would be more fulfilling later on. But of course you grow into that and you break it down over time. So I just on that point, I just don't think that we can communicate on a societal or cultural level without reducing our values into these chunky blocks that then need that kind of push people into certain paths, but of course never really work for every individual.
Sure. I would suggest to men that they stop watching pornography. I think pornography is bad for dicks. I think that it is. I mean, like I know women who've had boyfriends who couldn't come from regular sex because they watched too much porn. Mm-hmm. And so they were used to, masturbating to specific imagery and they couldn't come from having sex with their partner. It does cause impotence in some men. And it sort of if you watch something and you're masturbating to that thing, you're teaching yourself to be turned on by it. Like, I think that masturbating to misogyny is not healthy for your brain and the way that you're going to relate to women and the things that you're going to want in bed. And the things, like I said, the things that men see in pornography aren't conducive to respecting women. They're not conducive to learning how to have good sex. Like, it's just, I think it's really destructive. I think
I could push that critique a little bit further and say that it's not even the misogynist forms of pornography, because there's a wide swath of pornography out there. Not that I know anything about it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not all entirely demeaning, but it's still, it cuts out the possibility of sex as a conversation. It turns that conversation into talking. It's no longer a conversation. It interrupts that feedback loop that is in the potential of the sexual drive to create a bond between two people, or some sort of a conversation, a physical conversation.
Totally.
And
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm opposed to all pornography. I don't categorize some pornography as misogynist and some not. I think that it's all bad. It's just that, yeah, some is more misogynist than others. But
Interesting.
yeah, it's like this really linear thing. Like it's like you start here and then you end here when the man comes on your face, on your tits, like wherever. Like it's totally focused on male pleasure. And yeah, this like linear thing.
And well, bringing up that, do you know how to define pornography? Because this is a long-standing discussion in at least a United States copyright law. Like, what is pornography and what's just erotica?
Yeah,
And,
I see it.
yeah, exactly. Like, but can you define that? Like, at what point does something become pornography? Like, is
I
Twilight pornography? Is a romance novel pornography?
don't even know if I've ever seen Twilight, to be honest.
Oh,
So I can't say. I don't really, I mean, I don't know that there is like a cut and dry definition of pornography. And I don't know that anyone has come up with like, I mean, it's funny because that I know it when I see it thing is kind of a joke, but it's true. Like, you do know what pornography is. It exists for men to get off. Like, yeah, its purpose is for men to get off, and like it's sexual imagery, but it's not. I mean, like, I don't think that all sexual imagery constitutes pornography, so it is hard to say. Like, it's not that I've seen, like, it's not like all sex in movies is pornography. It's not like nudity in movies is pornography, and then at the same time, there's a lot of like, space in between where I think that there's lots of, pornographic imagery in advertising. And I think that there's pornographic imagery on TV and there's pornographic imagery in movies. So there's not really like a clear line.
but is pornography only pornography when it's directed for men to achieve satisfaction, or is there forms?
I'm just saying that's its point. That's the point of pornography.
Of all pornography. I mean, is that the formal definition in your mind? Pornography is something that gets a man off. And what about women's pornography? What about novels? What about erotica? Women usually are stimulated more by the literary forms.
I don't think that, are they? I don't know, maybe. I don't think that books count as pornography. No, it's imagery. I mean, the pornography, like the root of that word is the graphic depiction of horrors.
Yeah.
So that's a suitable definition, except that I don't want to call women whores, but I hope that people understand that's what pornography is.
Okay, so it's the exchange. It's some sort of exchange that takes imagery. What a woman is. Okay, so imagery that reduces the female into a vehicle for a man's pleasure.
Right.
Like that would be what a prostitute is. Like there's some sort of exchange, whether it's fair or not.
Right.
And you brought up, I don't know too much about your opinions on sex work, but I see that I do know at least enough that you're pretty strong against sex work.
Yeah, I mean, I think prostitution is horrible. It's like a horrible industry that chews up women and spits them out and sees women and girls abused every day all around the world.
Have you looked into how to stymie that or to stop that? And what are the methods of stopping that?
Yeah, so I support what's called the Nordic Model, which was originally implemented in Sweden after they did a really huge long-term study of prostitution and what was really happening in prostitution in Sweden. And what the Nordic Model does is it criminalizes men who pay for sex. It criminalizes brothel owners, it criminalizes pimps, and it decriminalizes women or those who sell sex. Obviously, also some men sell sex too. So So yeah, people who sell sex are totally decriminalized, and people who are exploiting women are criminalized. So Johns are fined, for example. And it actually gives prostituted women more power in the exchange because a man who is buying sex knows he's already doing something illegal. So if, for example, he does something like he doesn't pay, or he just in general behaves abusively or shittily to her or something, she can call the cops, and it doesn't even matter what he did because he's already doing something wrong, right? So he's in sort of a less powerful position than he would be otherwise, especially if, she's criminalized and he knows that.
But she's not criminalized in the
Right.
Nordic model.
Right.
How does that sit with you then, that a woman is still able to sell herself to a man, but nobody else is allowed to do that? You're still against her doing that?
Well, I wish that she didn't have to do that. I mean, the reason that people sell sex is because they need to survive. So what I want is there to be other options. I mean, most women don't want to have sex with a bunch of strangers for money. Most women don't stay in prostitution very long. Like, it's obviously a really awful industry, and women don't last very long because it's hard on you. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your mind. You don't want to be there. You're doing it because you have no other choice. You can't pay your rent. Like, you're really stuck, whatever. Like, so in Sweden, they also have exiting services. They also have like a much stronger social safety net than you guys do in the States. And I mean, in Canada, it's not as bad as in the States, but it's still not that great. So that also helps. Like, a big part of the solution would be to provide people with options, ways out, to ensure people aren't so poor that they get that desperate. I mean, if a woman really, really, really wants to sell sex because she likes it, I'm not going to tell her that she can't do it. But most women are not in the sex trade because they really, really like it.
Yeah, no. With Feminist Current and your lectures, it seems that you speak mostly to women about men. That's just from the gloss that I see. Your audience is mainly women, and you talk about men, you talk about patriarchy. How do you start to talk to men, and how have you been developing ways of branching out to change men's behavior? Or do you think that speaking to women is going to influence that?
Well, I talk to a lot of men about pornography in my real life, and it makes them really uncomfortable. So that's my contribution.
Well, you just like go through their browser histories? Is that what you do?
I meet a man and like, so do you watch pornography? And then he gets really uncomfortable and like, he's like, oh, you can't ask me that. I'm like, of course I can ask you that. And I am going to ask you that. But I actually do, like, I actually talk to a lot of men in my real life about pornography and why I think it's bad and why they shouldn't watch it. I mean, I also, we do have a lot of men in our audience at Feminist Current.
Oh, yeah?
For whatever reason. You're right that I do tend to specifically speak with women in mind and sort of for women, but I also do think that what I'm saying also does educate men. And I get a lot of emails from men all the time saying like, thanks, like you really changed my perspective on this. So I do know that some men are listening and reading. And I don't think that it is just women that I'm speaking to. And I don't know if that would be, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've kind of gone back and forth about it over the years, but I definitely do think that men need to change if we want to get anywhere. So we do kind of need to, some feminists would disagree with me. That's fine. I don't want to exclude men from the conversation per se, because I don't think that women can just change men by force. Or I mean, I guess if we were separatists and we wanted to like put all men on an island, or we wanted to all move to an island ourselves, we could.
That's what we're doing with the internet right now. Like you have an audience, I have an audience. They're gonna like battle it out in the comments down there, right? And I don't know like how we can establish a sort of discourse or just a a way of speaking to each other so that both sides can be heard, because there's a growing, or there's always been a reactionary movement to feminism where men who have survived a lot of abuse or for whatever reason have some problems with women, they need to be shown that their image of what women are is not what women are. And the same thing with radical feminists. They have an image of what the man is, and the rhetoric of patriarchy paints this image of what a man is that blocks you from actually saying when you're speaking to a man directly. So I think there's something about the current discourse and this internet thing that we're creating islands where we aren't branching out.
Sure. Like, totally. Like, I really think that having conversations is really important, and I'm not of the mind. I mean, maybe I was when I was younger. Now I'm not of the mind. Like, I don't think that I'm not one of those people who's going to say, like, educate yourself, like, don't speak, like, you're a man, shut up. Like, I'm positive I said that at some point earlier in my feminist career or whatever. I don't think that now at all. I totally think that we should be having conversations. I'm totally pro debate. I don't want to shut anybody down. I don't care how much I disagree with you or how much you offend me. Like, I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone, you know, like, I don't think it's helpful. I think that, you know, it's totally fine for feminists, for example, to organize amongst themselves. I think it's fine for us to have, you know, meetings without men, to have organizations without men, to have female-only spaces. Obviously, I'm a huge advocate of female-only spaces and women's right to organize amongst themselves without men. But I also do think that we need to step out of that and have other conversations with people who don't understand like, there's not that many people in the world who understand what feminism is or what radical feminism is. We do have to be, like, this idea that we don't have to talk to other people that we don't agree with or don't already understand or who aren't already on board is ridiculous. Of course we need to educate people. Of course we need to have conversations with people. Especially when, again, like, people have such a warped understanding of what feminists want and what feminism is. And I mean, I don't think that men are evil. God, like, I have tons of male friends and, you know, like, I date men all the time. Like, I know that men are not all bad, but at the same time, men do a lot of really horrible things. And even those men that I know and like are often still, you know, using pornography and don't really get. It's like, well, I'm just like, but I like it. And you're like, okay, yeah, I know you like it.
Yeah.
But there's also, like, ethics attached to that, and it's also having an impact on you and your real life relationships. And you know, but it's hard to have those conversations.
It is hard to have those conversations.
Explain, you know, to men what objectification is and why it matters and why, you know, how that harms women in various ways,
and even harms the man in various ways, and it shuts him off from personal growth, from having a deep, meaningful relationship, and so on.
Totally. It's like, I mean, men are, I don't want this to it's like, and what about the men conversation? But I mean, men are often, like, way worse than women at talking about their emotions and processing their emotions and having honest conversations about how they feel and what they're thinking. And they've often just never even learned those skills. And it's really frustrating for women to be on the other end of that, because we have been talking about our feelings and emotions and learning how to process our emotions. And we've been in, like, fucking therapy like 800 times. And then we have these boyfriends who are like, oh, I'm not going to therapy. And you're like, I don't know. I just feel mad. And you're like, oh my God, you're so dumb. Like, you know, like, and it's not necessarily their fault, except that it is their fault if they're refusing to go to therapy or do what they need to do to, like, learn how to process their shit. But
have you thought about why women are prone to be more processing oriented with their emotions and why men aren't?
It's okay for us to be emotional. It's okay for us to talk about our emotions. That's what we do with our friends. We talk about how we feel. We talk about our relationships. And, you know, like, when I talk to my male friends or, like, boyfriends, I'm shocked at how little they talk about anything. Like, I don't understand. I'm like, so you went for beers with blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm like, how is he doing? Like, he just broke up with his girlfriend. Like, is he okay? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, are you serious? Like, he just broke up with his, like, long-term partner and you didn't ask him how he's doing? Like, what the fuck did you talk about? Like, it's like you sit around like grunting. Like it's so crazy. And they you just don't seem to talk about your relationships or like I'm sure there's some men who talk about their feelings, but I feel like with my male friends, like we talk about my relationships and their feelings together, but I don't think that they do that with their male friends. And then it like creates this thing where like men like depend so much on their girlfriends because it's like the only person that they can talk to about this stuff, and they don't even really know how to talk about this stuff, and it just creates like a really frustrating dynamic.
That's interesting. It's almost like talking about emotions for women is what sex is to men, and men know what to do with sex and they just do it. It's really uncomfortable for the woman, but we're going to do it anyways. And then the woman's like, we're going to talk about emotions and it's going to be really uncomfortable, but we're going to do it anyways. I'm going to finish all over your face too.
Yeah.
And then you get all your friends together and you have a gangbang with your emotions.
No, you're not leaving this room. You're going to sit here and you're going to listen to me talk about all my fucking feelings. And then you're going to talk about your feelings. You're like, I like talking about my feelings. I don't even get it. Like, it's like my last boyfriend, like, refused to go to therapy. And I'm like, God, all you want to do is talk about yourself. You will love therapy. Like, why would you not go to therapy? You can just talk about yourself for an hour.
Did you get to the bottom of that? What that resistance was for him?
Oh, no, I don't. Okay. I mean, no. I can guess. Like, I mean, I think that it's something about men not wanting to need help. Like, it makes them feel weak that they would need to somebody else to help them with their problems. Like, I think he felt like it's like, well, I should be able to fix my own problems and we should be able to fix our own problems ourselves. Like, and it's like, well, sometimes you need some help. Like, sometimes you need a neutral party. Sometimes you need a mediator because you're going around in circles having the same argument over and over, and you need somebody to kind of like break through. But yeah, I think it was just this kind of old school idea. I mean, he also, wouldn't go to the doctor. And I know other men who are kind of like that too. Like, it's like, no, I'm such a man. I don't need help with anything. I'm like, so, but yeah, I don't know. Like, it seems like a lot of men have that issue where they refuse to go to therapy. And it's not like I think therapy is like the end all be all or the greatest thing ever. But when you have real issues and deep-seated problems and you're just nothing's changing and there's a block, then try something. Like try to do something. Like try to, and I've been to therapy and I found it useful in certain ways, like to learn like coping mechanisms and learn better communication and all that kind of thing. And I don't really understand the pushback against that. It's like, well, it's not going to hurt. Like, and if it helps, then great. Like, especially if you're having like these same kind of problems in your relationships or whatever that you can't seem to get past.
Well, it seems to go back to what you're saying about people not understanding what feminism is, or having a boogeyman or a boogie woman in their head about what feminism is. It seems to come back to trying to communicate the core ideas of feminism, and certain language maneuvers that certain feminists have made are very prone to abuse. Like with the word patriarchy, like going to college, going to very very, very progressive college. I would watch that word come up and be used for all of these different purposes, and just used in all these different presentations and stuff. The word itself has so much power, but it's never stapled down to one thing. So it's language like that makes it prone to abuse and then prone to misunderstanding, because people are going to associate it with the most negative instance of it being used. So I just wonder, to bring it back to kind of make a question, I wonder how can women communicate feminism to men if they don't understand why men are acting the way that they are acting and why they're avoiding certain things?
Yeah, it's true. And I think that there's a problem with, like, I don't think that it's helpful to say that men can't change. I don't think that we should just let men keep doing what they're doing forever and continue to be nice and understanding and empathetic, because that can be really hurtful. And that's, why women stay in abusive relationships, for example. I've been in an abusive relationship, and you stay because you think that they're going to change. You think it's going to stop. And you're like, oh, well, he has these problems, so no. But then, you're staying in something that's hurting you,
Hmm.
and that's bad for you, right? So, but at the same time, like, we do have to understand that, like, of course, like, if we don't think that men can change and grow and be different, then I don't understand the point of feminism. You know, like, we're trying to change society, and we're trying to change people's behavior, and we're trying to change the way that people relate to each other, right? Like, we're trying to change systems of power also. But yeah, I don't think that it's helpful to get stuck on, like, you know, just men do bad things, so.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Men did a bad thing, so.
no, yeah, but it's true. Men do bad things. We need to point that out. We need to try to change that because we don't want bad things. Bad things are, by definition, things that we don't want.
Yeah.
So how do you? But the problem comes back to how do you change people? One, people are going to be people. People are going to be a big spectrum of people. They're going to be good people and bad people, men, women, whatever. They're going to be good people and bad people. When you look at why bad people are bad, usually it comes down to, like, they grew up in very difficult circumstances. They themselves were abused, and it goes back, and then their parents were abused, their parents abused, their parents are bruised. And so when I find it like a very, very difficult needle to thread to figure out how do we educate together? How do we act as a community to deal with the problems of individuals? And how do we look at the problems, like, with women, the problems that women have? How do we look at those problems and then communicate that without the breakdown of automatically it's women against men, or it's all women, all men, or, you know, then you have MGTOW rising up to quash the third wave feminists, and then you just have these groups that aren't able to communicate and really see the complexity of the other person. And that's the problem that I have, and I need to be educated more about activism. But that's the problem that I have with activism, is that it usually comes down to trying to solve a problem without actually seeing how difficult it is to look at the causes of the problem. And then we get up into our bubbles of this group and that group, just talking to each other and no longer talking to one another as a community.
Yeah, the insular conversations do bother me. And I think there's a place for, like I said, insular conversations. I think there's a place for talking amongst yourselves and, you know, talking about what you want and what you can do about it, and organizing and planning activism or whatever. Planning events, like planning, you know, conferences or whatever, or like screening films and having panel discussions, blah, 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 to educate the public, for example. But yeah, like, I think that there's a real problem with these limited conversations that are happening. And I think that happens a lot amongst young activists, and on the left, for sure, liberals, left, like, whatever you want to call them. They're just talking amongst themselves, and they're just repeating the same thing over and over and over again and agreeing with each other. And it's like, well, like, you guys you aren't thinking critically about what you're saying, so your ideas are just going to be shitty then. Like, you can't have, like, solid theory, like, unless you continue to question that theory and think critically about that theory. You have to keep questioning your own ideas. Like, you can't just say, you know, like, well, this is what's true. Let's like, you know, like, you should be challenging yourself, and you should be challenged. And there's a real, like, block up against being challenged. Like, people don't want to hear opinions that they don't like. They don't want to hear from people that they don't like. They don't want to hear disagreement. Like, they're treating disagreement as this thing that's, like, personally offended. Like, we're all so fucking sensitive that we can't hear, like, something that we don't like. It's like, you should hear things that you disagree with. Maybe, I mean, part of the fear is probably like, oh, maybe I'll agree with something this person says, and then, God, I'll have to question my own identity, right? Like, I guess that would be scary if, like, everything about you is rooted in your idea as somebody who believes blah, or, like, you've put yourself into this, like, particular category. Like, I'm a leftist, so I have to believe all these specific things. And then you start to realize that maybe some of those things aren't right. or necessarily valid
Mm-hmm.
or good ideas. Like, I understand why that would be scary to people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been through that myself.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've always been a leftist. Like, I'm a socialist. And sort of recently I've started to be like, like, I'm not really into this binary of left versus right. Like, I would prefer to be an independent thinker. And a lot of the things that the left says is stupid. So I'm going to be open to different ideas. I'm going to think about themselves. Like, I'm not a stupid person. I can think critically. Like, and if you refuse to hear other people's opinions because you're so scared of them, because you disagree with them, then maybe you're not that smart. Like, you should be able to argue. Like, you should be able to defend your own ideas, right? You should be able to go into a debate and defend your own ideas.
It's there's one way of framing it as a debate, but I frame the political discussion more as a game of Legos. And when we split up into left and right, it's like I can only build with blue Legos now. I can no longer use any red Legos because then I'd be a communist or whatever, you know?
Right.
So it just that limiting of freedom can be freeing to a certain extent to really understand like your side of things or what you're gravitating towards. But the limitation is just it's so insulting to your imagination. You know, It's not even, and it does lead to those other problems. You end up becoming a bigot that goes around calling everybody else a bigot, you know, like one thing that I see a lot nowadays. So
yeah, like, who's the Nazi? Am I the Nazi? Are you the Nazi? Like,
well, whoever punches the other person first is not the Nazi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you vilify anybody who you've decided is on the other end of the political spectrum or who doesn't agree with whatever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it gets way out of control because now it's just like if you saw somebody talking or retweeting somebody that you disagree with, now you disagree with the other person that agreed with this other person on one issue. Like it's this continuum. It breaks down what a human being is into like any given statement. And it's so insulting to what a human being is, which is this huge complex system.
I know. Yeah, we are complex and we are nuanced, and like we should admit that. Like, I'm tired of seeing people pretend to be perfect people on the internet. It's like, oh, you think perfect thoughts all the time? Like, that must be nice. Like, what is that like for you? Like, they're all just such phonies. Like,
well, how do you embrace your imperfection then? Like when you make a mistake, this is something that what? Okay, you don't have it. That was a trick question, and you won.
Sorry, go on.
So you ignore it then?
No, I don't ignore it. I mean, like, I think critically about what I do and like my behaviors, and but I mean, I'm not gonna pick on myself all the time. Like, it's not like I'm gonna be like, whatever, you wear makeup, you're a bad feminist. Like, you straighten your hair, you're a bad feminist. It's like some things I just do and I'm like, whatever. Like, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't such a big deal. And yeah, and
it's interesting because you have a media presence and it's pretty powerful. It's pretty strong. Like, just looking at your stats or whatever. Does that change the game for you, or have you watched yourself be kind of pushed around by the people that you're speaking to, or be pushed against by the people that you're speaking to? How are you aware of that audience that you've gathered? How does that affect you?
But I think people trust me. Like, I think that I think people know that I'm not going to be pushed around. Like, I don't cave, like, to bullying, like, from wherever it comes from. Like, I do, it's really important to me that I can think independently. And, you know, I also, like, I am accountable to my community. I'm accountable to other feminists, but that doesn't mean that I won't disagree with other feminists. I've disagreed with feminists lots of times. We have conversations about it. We're respectful to each other.
Okay.
I think people know that I'm not going to be bullied, and I think that people have followed my work for long enough to know that I'm authentic and I'm not a liar, and I'm not going to say something that I don't mean, and I'm not going to say something that I haven't thought about. It doesn't mean I'm not going to put everything out on the internet. That's not necessary. I don't have to be like, whatever, like, I went on a date last night and, like, I don't know, like, behaved in, like, a typically feminine way. Like, I don't know, I let him pay for me or something like that. Like, again, I don't think that that's that important, but Like,
Hmm.
I think that people know that you're human, and we have to all acknowledge that we're all human, and we all, grew up in this society, and so naturally we are going to sort of have conformed to specific roles, and we should at the same time try to push back against those roles and think critically about how we behave towards one another, how we behave in relationships, and definitely think about the choices we make.
Yeah.
But we also can't do
Yeah.
everything. And
Being critical within measure, within reason, like
yeah,
respecting yourself while you're trying to edge society toward a better
and
place.
being totally hard on yourself. Like, don't pick on yourself all the time. Like, you're like I said, like you're human, you're flawed. We're all gonna struggle for the rest of our lives to try to be like the best people that we can be, I guess, or whatever. Not, we'll give up. But like, I'm tired. Like, but I just, yeah, you sort of have to pick and choose the things that are important to focus on. For me in my work, it's important for me to focus on things like prostitution and things like pornography and things like violence against women, and this gender identity issue, because these are things that I think are really important, and I think that they have a really negative impact on the world. So yeah, like, I'm not going to stress that much because I like watching Jersey Shore. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well, how do you shore yourself up against the gender is purely a social construct, folks? If you want to push against gender roles, you still want a gender role. You don't want there to be no gender, right?
I would prefer there to be no gender.
Okay.
So I make a distinction between gender and sex. Sex is male or female. Gender is gender roles and stereotypes. So like that idea of masculinity and femininity,
Okay. So
which are really just those are like behaviors and personality traits. I want people to be whoever they are and not feel like they have to conform to whatever stereotypical masculine characteristics are, or feminine characteristics. I don't want women to feel like they have to wear uncomfortable high heels or get plastic surgery to have bigger breasts because that will make them appear more sexy or feminine or whatever.
But isn't there a line there though where that sex difference is being attacked itself? That
Yeah, people are pretending that it doesn't exist. They're pretending that there's no such thing as male or female. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm still, it's just it's for my mind, I can't get through my mind that once you decouple sex from gender, I know that you can be a man and a woman and be more or less masculine, more or less feminine, but once you totally decouple gender from sex, then sex doesn't mean anything either. It all becomes performance. It all becomes...
Sex means something because we have very different bodies. Male bodies are very different from female bodies. Obviously, women can become pregnant.
But that also feeds into we have very different minds, too. We have different ways of communicating.
I think that we have different minds. I think that we have different experiences. And I think that our differences in communication are largely socialized, like what we were talking about before, where men feel like they can't or they don't know how to talk about their emotions or process their emotions, and women do. And I think that's just because women are socialized to talk about their emotions more, and women know that it's okay to feel emotions and to talk about their emotions, and men know that they're not supposed to be emotional.
And you don't think that arises from biology? That's not an emergent phenomena from biology. That's
socialized, yeah.
Purely socialized.
I mean, who can say for sure?
Yeah.
Like, can't say for sure, but I do know, like, we do know that socialization has a huge impact on that, right? Like, you do know that men are socialized to believe that they shouldn't be emotional and that it's women who are emotional. Right?
To a certain extent, this is where it comes down to me. For me, like I spent about 15 years working in preschool and from 1 to 4 and watching little girls and little boys just emerge. Like these people, they're people, but I saw definite patterns just watching them develop as people pre-socialization. I wasn't doing a lot of socialization. You could probably make the argument that I was seeing patterns that I had been socialized. Maybe you are, but I'd see emergent properties that when girls were much more verbal, generally early on, much more verbal, boys much more physical early on, more adroit at doing things with their hands. Girls tend to be more adroit at doing things with their face, their communicative strengths. I just see that emerging already at that level. So it's such a slippery, it's such a phased end line that I don't know where the culture and where the nature and where the nurture like intersect and what
it's
they have
probably
influence.
impossible to say for sure where it intersects and like, you know, how much is totally social and socialized and how much might be natural or to have some kind of connection to evolution and stuff like that, right? Like I don't discount evolution as something that impacts our behaviors and the things that we're good at. But I do think that people have very different personalities. And when I was a kid, I liked playing with trucks and I hated pink and I didn't want to wear dresses and I learned how to pee standing up. So I was really proud of myself.
I know somebody else that I interviewed that admitted that online.
It's really little. I think lots of little girls do that. You know, and I played with He-Man instead of Barbie dolls, like when I was little, and I sort of wanted to reject girly things. Eventually that changed, you know, I got older and then I really did like, I don't know. Did that liking girly things, do you feel that merged from within you just as a part of your character? No, of course not. It emerged.
It came
social pressure and learning like what a girl should be and wanting to be like attractive and liked by boys. But yeah, like I think in general, people have different personalities. We should let them have their personalities. Socialization also can be very subtle. Like it wouldn't have just been you. It would have been like their families, these kids' families, and like what they're seeing on TV or just what they're seeing in the outside world, you know, like it's so difficult to say.
Even our biology has been designed by evolution to be socialized. Like I was reading this book, we have like so many chromosomes, like in the hundreds, we have hundreds of chromosomes and trillions of neurons, like what we actually are develops after the bodies put it in place, the language and everything else. So socialization
our brains are changed by the world around us. Like our brains are shaped by socialization. Like, obviously society and culture impacts our minds.
And so is women's studies the study of culture in order to change it then when you were studying that? Is that kind of what you would say it is?
I mean, it's about studying systems of power, about studying society, about studying how men and women are socialized in society.
With the point to change it, or with the point to just observe
it? Create a different, better world, a more ethical world, I would say.
A more ethical.
Yeah, a more ethical, more just world.
I thought you said epical, like some sort of
a really epic world.
Yeah. That's what I want.
Epical a word?
I don't know. You're free to make up the words that you want.
The most epical world you can imagine.
Meghan, speaking of women, I really need to help my woman create the food tonight.
Oh, good. Good for you.
So I have to be a good meninist.
Good man.
Yeah, a mighty good man.
Yeah.
I don't know who sang that song, but thanks for joining me. I would like to talk more about you. There's so many questions about what you do and what you think about the world that I feel inform me, help me grow.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it was really great to talk with you. Happy to talk again whenever.
Good luck with the liquor store. Unless they're closed now.
I'm doing really well at the liquor store. They all think that I'm under 25.
That's a wonderful thing.
25, but much younger than I actually am, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Someday, maybe that'll
Maybe
be
they're just
revealed.
being nice to me. I don't know.
They know how to sell that
Like,
extra bottle of gin.
like, of course you can.
Charming.